Hi guys and welcome to another episode. My name is Edwin and today I'm gonna show you a sweet mono blue commander that is called Vnwxt Verbose Host. Vnwxt is a 2-mana homunculus that introduces a new engine which is called Start Your Engines. This mechanic says whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, if your speed is 1 or greater, increase your speed by 1. Max speed is 4. This ability triggers only once each turn. So whenever you hit 4, you have max speed, but you can only do it once, meaning you need at least 3 turns if you do it once a turn. So if you play this on turn 2 and you already have a creature that can attack, you now go to 2. So on turn 4 you will be able to hit max speed, and our commander says whenever you have max speed, if you would draw a card, draw 2 cards instead. You probably know Teferi's Ageless Insight. Well, this is about the same, except Teferi's Ageless Insight says if you would draw a card except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. Vnwxt just says draw 2 cards whenever you draw it. So this commander pushes you in a direction which is card draw, obviously, but how you're gonna do it and how you are gonna win is totally up to you. This kind of commander that is quite open, I really like it because you can build it in several ways and you can also win in several ways. Before we get further into the video, I would like to remind you that most of the people watching this aren't subscribed. It is a really easy way to help the channel out, help us grow and help us to keep making content like this one. Thank you very much. Let's first look at the archetype we are going to build. If you remember, those are aggro, control, mid-range and combo. And combo is usually a combination of aggro, combo or control combo. We could, of course, play this aggro if we really want to go through our deck as fast as possible. So choosing a archetype depends on what kind of way we want to win. As I said, there are multiple, but I've chosen one that involves drawing your second card and making tokens. And with those tokens, we're gonna draw a lot of cards in effects like Bident of Vesa, that says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. So if we have 4 fairies that are just 1/1s, we're gonna deal 4 damage, no big deal, but we are gonna draw 4 cards. And if our commander is on the battlefield with max speed, that is gonna be 8 cards. Since we are drawing a lot of cards, we're gonna win by either getting a Psychosis Crawler on the battlefield that says power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand, and whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So if you can draw 40 cards, essentially, you're gonna win. And with Vnwxt, that actually only means that you have to draw 20 cards. So if you already have 20 cards in your hand, you play a Windfall and boom, you've won the game. If Psychosis doesn't finish it, Elandra can, because whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 flying Drake. And whenever you draw your 5th card each turn, Elandra and Drakes you control each get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. So we have 10 cards in hand. All our Drakes and Elandra get +10/+10. Now if that doesn't finish it as well, we have the classic Jace, Laboratory Maniac and Vesa's Oracle that all say if you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. We all know the insta combos, which are pretty easy to pull off, but drawing your entire deck, that usually gets a lot of respect on your opponent. And with Vnwxt, I think we're just gonna get there. So let's dive in all the cards that you will add to draw your entire deck, or just finish them off with a lot of big Drakes or a Psychosis Crawler. So if we want to get max speed, the easiest way to do it is a couple of creatures with unblockable or just flying. That's enough evasion usually in Commander. So we have Fairy Seer and Battlefield Scry 2, that is a flyer. We have Gingerbrute, that is a 1/1 haste, and you can pay 1 mana to make it unblockable basically. Shoreline Looter is unblockable. Slip Through Space can make something unblockable. Ghostly Pilferer says whenever it becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. It also says whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card, which in Commander is pretty frequently because your commander is being cast somewhere else other than your hand. So for each commander cast, you can already draw a card, and you can make it unblockable by discarding a card. And those creatures are all 1 or 2 mana, so you can do it as fast as possible. Gingerbrute and Fairy Seer are 1 mana, so if you draw those in your opening hand, on turn 1 you play one of those creatures, on turn 2 your commander, So your speed is now 1, then you hit and your speed is already 2, which is just perfect because by turn 4 you will be able to draw 2 cards whenever you draw a card, and that is really quick. Our commander wants a lot of card draw, so let's start there. We have Behold the Mild first, Cry to draw 2, always good. Bindant of Feza, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. The same for Coastal Piracy and Reconnaissance Mission. And we also have the Indomitable, which is a vehicle that says, well, the same, but it's also a 6/6 trample. And I may cast it from my graveyard as long as control 3 or more tapped pirates and vehicles. We're not gonna get there, but yeah, it can just go through by itself if you don't have the flying fairies, so that one is pretty cool. We also have Forgotten Creation that says at the beginning of your upkeep, you may discard all the cards in your hand. If you drew, draw that many cards. This one is pretty neat because our commander says we have no maximum hand size. So if we already have 10 cards, we're gonna discard them. If we already have the max speed, we're gonna draw 20 cards. So now we've gone through at least 30 cards in our library already, making it pretty easy to get to the 100. We have the Ghostly Pilferer that says whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their turn, draw a card. We can also discard a card to make it unblockable this turn. Jace's Archivist is just a windfall that you can do every turn. Kumena's Awakening is like a Phyrexian Arena, because it says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card. If you have the City's Blessing, instead only you draw a card. We have Muldrifter and we also have Nulldrifter. Both say when you cast a spell, draw a card, but you can also cast them for their evoke cost. If you do, it's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. Mystic Remora, of course, just in every blue deck it's good, and Rhystic Study the same. I don't try to put it in every deck, but since this deck is all about the card draw, why not do it most efficiently? We have Shoreline Looter that says it can't be blocked, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Discard a card unless 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. We also have Skull Clamp. Since we are making the 1/1s, we can basically sacrifice them for 1 mana and draw 2 cards. With our commander it's going to be 4, so that is quite a lot. We have Struggle for Project Purity that says when it enters the battlefield, choose Brotherhood or Enclave. Well, this deck is all about Brotherhood. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent draws a card. You draw a card for each card drawn this way. So you have 3 opponents, they're gonna draw 3 cards, so you get to draw 3 cards as well. Then we have Teferi that says whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi. For 0 you can draw a card, -2 you can create a spirit with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. But it also have a -12. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. So basically, for 1 opponent, you can, get this aboard wipe. And you can use it if you have mana and the engines in the on the battlefield already to use this the same turn that you cast it with the passive of whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi. And since your commander doubles it, you only need to draw 4 extra cards, so making it 8 to use this the same turn. Since we are doubling with our commander, why not quadruple the draw with Teferi's Ageless Insight? We also have Tulfi, which doubles the draw that you're already doing, because whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Tulfi, and when Tulfi leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. Windfall, of course, and yeah, I kept this one for last because I just discovered this card and boy is it funny. Standstill, a 2 mana enchantment, says whenever a player casts a spell, sacrifice Standstill. If you do, each of that player's opponents draws 3 cards. So the name of the card says it all. Whenever this enchantment hits the battlefield, you don't want to be the first one to cast a spell, because you're gonna be down on cards by a lot. Because basically you have 3 opponents, they all draw 3 cards, so you are down on 9 cards in card advantage. Which is pretty funny for us, because it's just gonna be the last spell that we cast, and if we have instants, we can wait for the last player before it's our turn. And someone is gonna cast, and they're gonna be sad, and we're gonna be happy. Now, since we wanna draw a card, the easiest way and the fastest way to do this is by adding cantrips as well. Since our commander can double the cards we draw, cantrips actually give card advantage instead of only card selection. So that makes it better. We have Brainstorm, draws 3 cards. If you have your commander, you draw 6, even better. Dress Down just draws a card, but all creatures lose all abilities this turn. And at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice it. Git Probe, which is basically free. Opt, scry 1, draw. Peek, look at target player's hand, draw a card. So like a Git Probe, but instant. And you have to pay the mana. Ponder, look at the top 3, put them back in any order. You may shuffle your library and you draw a card. Quicken, the next sorcery card you cast this turn can be cast as though it had flash. Draw a card. Slip Through Space, target creature can't be blocked this turn. Draw a card, which is pretty neat in this deck as well, because there are ways to really pump up your creatures. And Twisted Image says switch target creature's power and toughness into end of turn. I find this one pretty funny. For instance, if you have a Mind Skinner on the other end of the table, that is a 10-1, you can now make it a 1-10. And Mind Skinner mills by the amount of damage it does, so instead of milling 10, it's now just gonna mill 1, which is pretty funny. Now, if we're gonna draw all those cards, what are we gonna do with it? First of all, we're gonna make tokens. Alendra says whenever you draw your second card, create a 2/2 blue trade creature token with flying. Chasm Skulker says whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Chasm Skulker, and when it dies, create X 1/1 with Island Walk, where X is the number of counters on Chasm Skulker. Detective of the Month is pretty cool, as long as you have the city's blessing. Detectives you control can't be blocked, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 white and blue detective. Homunculus Horde says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature, so basically a detective as well, but the new Homunculus Horde will have this ability as well. So if you can do this 4 times, which is 1 turn cycle, you go to 2, you go to 4, you go to 8, and then you go to 16. You already have 32 power on board, so this can go really crazy, but of course, yeah, you need to draw a lot of cards. But a cantrip with your commander is already 2 cards, so it's not that weird as well. Min also says whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a illusion. With this creature gets +1/+0 for each other illusion you control. And whenever an illusion you control dies, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that creature's power from your hand onto the battlefield. You have 2 illusions, they are both now 2/1s. If one of them dies, you can put a permanent with mana value 2 or less onto the battlefield for free. Mischievous Mystic just says whenever you draw your second card, create a fairy. Ominous Seas says whenever you draw a card, put a 4 shadow counter on Ominous Seas and remove 8 of those counters to create an 8/8. Pretty funny of this card is that you can just store those. So if you feel like there's a board wipe coming, you just keep those on there, and yeah, after the board wipe you make 2 8/8s. When it's your turn, you have 16 power to swing. And how are we gonna get there? Of course, making a mono blue deck, you're just gonna use the mana rock, so Arcane Signet, Felwyrstone, Mindstone, Soul Ring, Thought Vessel, Wayfarer's Bauble. But there's also the Medallion, which in a mono blue deck is just perfect. Then we have Emrakkul's Messenger, still in the second card theme. It makes a spawn. We have Expedition Map, that for basically 3 mana you can put a land card from your library into your hand, and that card is probably always gonna be Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, because for 2 mana and to tap it, you can choose a color and add to your mana pool an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. And you'll see blue spells have a lot of devotion, so if you have 8 devotion, you pay 2 and tap it, so basically paying 3 mana and you get 8 mana back. I have goldfished this deck quite some times today, and just whenever I have Nykthos on the battlefield, my game plan just goes so much faster. Then there's also High Tide, which in a mono blue deck is pretty fun, because it says until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds an additional blue. In a perfect world, on turn 2, you would have an Arcane Signet. On turn 3, you had 3 lands. You tap the Arcane Signet, so you used to be able to make 4 mana. You have 3 islands, now you can make 6 mana. Basically like a Dark Ritual at this point. If you can get it on a later turn, so for instance you have 6 lands, it's going even crazier, of course. The Nyx Lotus, pretty much like the Nykthos. The Nyx Lotus, pretty much like the Nykthos, taps for our devotion. Only we don't have to pay mana to tap it, but it does enter the battlefield tapped. So we always have to wait 1 turn cycle to be able to use it. Throne of Eldraine taps for 4, but we can only spend it to cast monocolored spells of that color. Friend Dynamo just taps for 3 mana, and Gauntlet of Power. When it comes into play, we choose a color, which is blue, of course. Creatures of the chosen color get +1/+1, so not only our creatures, but all the creatures on the battlefield. And whenever a basic land is tapped for mana of the chosen color, its controller adds 1 mana of that color to his or her mana pool. So we have 5 islands, now we have 10 mana instead of 5, which you're going to be able to use with all the cantrips, with all the card draw. You're going to keep on going. So those ramp harder spells are really important in this deck. Now, if things aren't really going to plan, you need to wait to board wipe. We have Aetherdrift to return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. We have Evacuation to just return all creatures to their owner's hand. And we have Teferi. Yeah, like I said, -12, you basically board wipe 1 person. Since it's quite an aggressive deck, we're going to want a lot of mana, a lot of card draw. We do not want too many board wipes, so Teferi is a board wipe, but we also just play it for the other abilities as well. So basically we have 2 dedicated board wipes. So I've now shown you what you can do with a lot of mana, how you're gonna draw a lot of cards, how you're gonna pay off drawing all those cards, and if you've drawn just all the cards in your deck, there are 3 cards to make you win. For me personally, it's just so much fun because I just really love the Draw Matters decks, because you're just gonna see all the cards that you put there, and you're not gonna stick to the plan that you have with your opening hands and the few cards you draw after, but you're gonna make plans with cards in your library or just even more, and that really puts up a challenge, and yeah, makes for a really fun game of Commander. So my opinion on Vnwxt, a Verbose host, is yeah, the max speed is probably not going to be too hard to get. If you just play the Vnwxt, then it gets removed. The max speed still keeps on going whenever you hit your opponents in your turn, so you can just cast it again, maybe in 4 turns later, and it's only going to be 4 mana by now, because yeah, just the cost of 2 mana for this commander is really cheap, so you're always going to be smoothing your curve and your card draws. I am really excited for this set. It is just showing so many commanders that you can build around, and that, well, maybe not like Vnwxt draws you a lot of cards, but gives you a lot of power, ways to cheat out, or just new mechanics to build around. So my question for you today is, what commander are you most excited to build around, and what really got your attention from the first time you saw it during the spoilers? For now, I would like to thank you for your time, and see you on the next one. Brrrrrr.